Aict-moi, cowboy, et j'y ferai en sorte que tu sois satisfait, dit l'Apache Messi en vent. The sun hung low over the dry land, turning the dust in the air a dull gold. The small frontier town was louder than usual. People had gathered from nearby farms and camps, drawn by rumor and habit. Some came out of need, others out of curiosity. Wagons stood in uneven lines, horses stamped their hooves, and men spoke in rough voices. In the center of it all stood a wooden platform that had been built many times before and torn down just as often. It was never a good sign when it appeared. She stood near that platform, her hands tied but her back straight. Her long dark hair fell loose over her shoulders, dusty and tangled from days of travel under guard. Her face showed signs of tiredness, but her eyes were sharp and alert. She did not cry. She had learned long ago that tears rarely changed outcomes. Inside her chest, fear lived like a quiet fire, burning but controlled. Only days earlier, her life had been different. She had lived among her people, surrounded by familiar sounds and shared work. The mornings had been filled with routine tasks, the evenings with stories and silence under the stars. Then came the violence, sudden and confusing. Shouting, running, smoke, and the sharp smell of fear. She lost track of time after that. By the time the noise ended, many were gone, and she was no longer free. Now she was here in a place that did not know her name or her past. To the people watching her, she was not a person with memories and meaning. She was seen as something to be claimed, something reduced to a single moment on a wooden stage. She understood this truth quickly. Understanding it did not make it easier, but it made it clearer. She watched the crowd carefully. Faces blurred together at first, but soon patterns appeared. There were men who looked eager, their eyes cold and calculating. There were others who looked unsure, standing back as if uncomfortable but unwilling to leave. Some laughed. Some whispered. A few avoided her eyes altogether. She knew that whoever stepped forward would decide the next chapter of her life. That knowledge weighed heavily on her, but she refused to let it crush her spirit. If she had learned anything from her elders, it was that survival often depended on sharp thinking, even in the darkest moments. The man who spoke loudly near the platform used words she barely listened to. His voice rose and fell, describing her as if she were an object. She focused instead on breathing slowly, keeping her thoughts clear. Panic would help no one. She needed to act, but act wisely. Her gaze moved across the crowd again, slower this time. Then she noticed him. He stood slightly apart from the others, near a post where a horse was tied. He was not dressed finely. His clothes were worn from work and travel. His hat was pulled low, shading his eyes, but she could still see that his attention was not the same as the rest. He did not smile. He did not shout. He watched quietly, as if weighing something heavy inside himself. There was a tiredness about him that felt familiar. Not weakness, but the kind of wear that comes from long days and few comforts. His hands rested loosely at his sides, rough and scarred, the hands of someone who worked hard rather than ordered others around. She could not know his heart, but she sensed that he was different from many of the men pushing forward. The bidding began. Numbers were called out. The sound of voices grew sharper, more impatient. With every raised offer, her future narrowed. She felt the space around her closing in like a trap tightening its hold. She knew she could not stay silent. When the moment came, she lifted her chin and spoke. Her voice was calm, though it took effort to keep it that way. She used the language they would understand, choosing her words carefully. What she said was not a promise of feeling or desire. It was a calculated statement meant to shift attention, to guide the choice toward the lesser danger. She spoke as someone who understood the rules of this cruel moment and decided to use them to survive. The crowd reacted at once. Some laughed louder. Others leaned in, surprised. The man near the post looked up fully now, his eyes meeting hers for the first time. There was a pause, brief but important. In that pause, she saw something flicker across his face. Not hunger, not pride, something closer to conflict. The bidding continued, but the energy changed. Fewer voices called out. The man stepped forward slowly, as if each step required thought. When he spoke, his voice was steady, not raised. He named a number and did not repeat it. He simply stood there waiting. The auction ended soon after. The sound of a final strike echoed across the square. Just like that, the noise shifted. Some people turned away, already losing interest. To them, the moment had passed. For her, everything had changed again. The man approached the platform. Up close, she could see lines on his face carved by sun and worry. He did not look at her as if she were a prize. He looked uncomfortable, uncertain. That uncertainty gave her a small sense of relief, though she did not let it show. They were not given time to speak. Her hands were untied and then retied in a different way, meant for travel. The man nodded once, paid what was demanded, and turned away. She followed, her steps measured. Each step away from the platform felt unreal, as if she were watching herself from far away. They walked through the edge of town in silence. The sounds of the crowd faded, replaced by the softer noises of animals and wind. His horse stood waiting, calm and patient. He checked the straps and supplies with practiced care, avoiding her eyes. When he finally looked at her, his expression was serious. "You'll ride," he said simply, gesturing to the horse. There was no order in his voice, only practicality. She climbed on without help. The movement reminded her how tired her body was, how many days had passed without rest. He mounted behind her, keeping space between them. When the horse began to move, she held on, her thoughts racing faster than the path beneath them. They left the town behind. The land opened up wide and quiet. The sky seemed larger out here, the air cleaner. Yet she did not feel free. Not yet. As they traveled, she watched his behavior closely. He did not speak unless necessary. He guided the horse with care, stopping when she shifted uncomfortably, offering water without being asked. These small actions did not erase her fear, but they confused it. She had prepared herself for cruelty or control. Instead, she found caution and distance. Still, she trusted nothing easily. She kept her guard high, her mind sharp. Kindness could be a mask. Silence could hide intent. She reminded herself of this with every mile. As night approached, they made camp near a cluster of trees. He built a small fire and prepared food. He handed her a portion and stepped away, giving her space. She ate slowly, watching him over the flames. The firelight softened his features, but did not erase the heaviness he carried. She wondered why he had come to that town at all. What loss or need had placed him there on that day? She wondered if he understood what it meant to take responsibility for another life, even unwillingly. Most of all, she wondered how long she would remain in this uncertain state, caught between danger and possibility. When the fire burned low, he spoke again, his voice quiet. He said her safety mattered. He said the road ahead would not be easy, but he would not harm her. He did not ask for thanks. He did not expect trust. He simply stated what he could offer. She listened, saying nothing. Words were easy. Actions would tell the real story. As she lay awake under the open sky, staring at the stars she had known since childhood, she felt both grief and determination. She had lost much, but she was still alive. She had been forced into a cruel moment, but she had chosen how to face it. This was only the beginning. The morning came slowly, carried in by cool air and soft light. The fire from the night before had turned to ash. Birds moved through the trees, unaware of the heavy thoughts resting in the woman's mind. She sat up quietly, careful not to make noise. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then memory returned, sharp and clear. The cowboy was already awake. He stood near the horse, tightening a strap and checking supplies. He nodded when he saw her awake, not surprised, not demanding. He handed her water and stepped back again. This pattern of distance continued, and she noticed it. He was careful, almost too careful, as if he feared crossing an invisible line. They began traveling again soon after. The land stretched wide in every direction. Dry ground, low hills, and the endless sky made her feel small but also strangely steady. Movement kept her thoughts from turning dark. As long as they were moving, there was purpose. Hours passed in silence. The horse's steady rhythm matched her breathing. She used that time to think. She replayed the moment at the auction again and again. She knew what she had said and why she had said it. It was not pride, it was not hope, it was survival. Still, she wondered how he had understood her words. Did he believe them? Did he judge her for them? By midday, the sun burned strongly overhead. He stopped near a shallow stream. While the horse drank, he sat on a rock and removed his hat, wiping sweat from his face. Up close, she could see the marks of a hard life, scars, rough skin, and eyes that had seen more loss than joy. She finally spoke, breaking the long quiet. "Why did you choose me?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but the question carried weight. He looked surprised, as if he had expected silence to continue forever. He took his time before answering. "I didn't like what I saw back there," he said. "Too many people looking at you like you weren't human." His words were simple, not rehearsed. There was no pride in them. If anything, there was doubt. "You could have walked away," she said. "Yes," he answered. "I could have." "I know." They traveled during cooler hours, rested when the sun was strongest, and camped near water whenever possible. He shared food fairly and made sure she was warm at night. He never touched her without clear reason, and even then he asked with his eyes before acting. Still, trust did not grow quickly. She watched everything. The way he handled his tools, the way he spoke to animals, the way he reacted when things went wrong. Once, when a strap broke and supplies spilled into the dirt, he cursed softly but laughed at himself. The sound startled her. It was the first time she had seen lightness in him. At night, she often lay awake while he slept. The open land felt both freeing and dangerous. She thought of escape many times. She could run when he slept. She could hide in the hills, but where would she go? The world beyond was still filled with people who saw her as something less. Freedom without safety was another kind of trap. One evening, a storm rolled in suddenly. Wind tore across the land, bending grass and darkening the sky. He hurried to set up shelter, working fast and focused. When rain began to fall hard, he pulled the cover tight and checked that she was dry. The storm raged for hours, loud and unforgiving. In that small space, with rain pounding around them, the silence felt different. Less tense. More human. "You don't have to stay with me forever," he said quietly, staring out into the rain. "When we reach the next settlement, you can choose." The next settlement was smaller than the last. Fewer people, fewer eyes. When they arrived, he kept his distance, allowing her to walk freely. No rope, no grip. She felt the weight of that trust and carried it carefully. They stayed on the edge of town. He traded quietly for supplies and returned quickly. When he came back, he told her the truth. "It's not safe for you here," he said. "Too many men asking questions." He had taken to the road because staying in one place held too many memories. He did not speak of the past often, but when he did, his words were honest and unpolished. She shared less. Her memories were sharp and painful. But sometimes, when the fire burned low and the stars filled the sky, she spoke of her people, their customs, their stories, their strength. He listened without interruption, without judgment. Slowly, respect replaced fear. Not complete trust, but something close enough to breathe easier. One morning, as they stood on a ridge overlooking open land, she realized how far she had come, not just in distance, but within herself. She was still cautious, still alert, but she was no longer silent out of weakness. She spoke when she chose. She decided when to stay and when to move. The bargain that had begun in desperation was changing shape. What started as a choice between dangers was becoming a path shaped by awareness and control. She did not know where the road would end, but for the first time, she felt she had a voice in deciding how it would continue, and that knowledge gave her strength. The land began to change as they moved farther from the main trails. The open plains slowly gave way to rocky paths and scattered trees. Travel became harder but quieter. Fewer people passed this way, and that made the woman feel both safer and more alert. Silence could protect, but it could also hide danger. They reached the cowboys' land after several more days. It was not a grand place. There was a small house made of wood and stone, a fenced area for animals and tools arranged with care. Everything showed signs of use, not decoration. This was a place built for work and survival, not comfort. Still, It stood firm against the wind, and that mattered. He showed her where she could rest and where water was kept. He explained what work needed to be done and which areas were better left alone. He spoke as if she were a partner in daily life, not someone under control. She listened closely, noting every detail. The first days were awkward. She woke early out of habit, unsure what was expected. Sometimes she helped without being asked. Other times she watched, waiting for direction that did not come. He never raised his voice. If something went wrong, he corrected it calmly. If she chose not to do a task, he did it himself. This freedom confused her more than strict rules ever could. She tested boundaries in small ways. One morning, she walked far beyond the fence to collect plants she recognized from her homeland. He noticed but did not stop her. Another day, she refused a task that reminded her too much of her past. He accepted her refusal without question. Still, she did not let her guard down. Kindness could fade. Circumstances could change. She stayed alert, watching for signs of control or anger. None appeared. At night, the quiet felt heavy. There were no crowds, no constant noise, just wind, insects, and distant animals. Sometimes the silence made memories louder. Faces from her past returned in dreams. She woke with her heart racing, the loss fresh again. One night after such a dream, she sat outside until morning. The cowboy noticed and brought her a blanket. He did not ask questions. He simply sat nearby, facing the horizon, giving her company without pressure. That simple act eased something tight inside her chest. Days turned into weeks. The routine of work slowly rebuilt strength in her body. Carrying water, tending the land, and caring for animals gave her purpose. She felt useful again, not because someone demanded it, but because she chose it. She also began to notice changes in him. He smiled more often now, though quietly. He spoke a little more, especially about practical things. Sometimes he hummed while working, unaware he was doing it. The heaviness he carried did not disappear, but it no longer ruled every movement. One afternoon, trouble came without warning. A group of riders appeared on the edge of the land. They did not approach right away, but their presence was clear. The cowboy stiffened when he saw them. He told her to stay inside and prepare to leave if needed. His calm tone did not hide his concern. She watched from a small window as he stepped outside. The riders came closer, their expressions unreadable. They spoke briefly. She could not hear the words, but she could sense tension. After a long moment, the riders turned away and left. When he came back inside, his face was serious. "They were asking questions," he said, "about a woman taken from a town weeks ago. Staying meant facing people who would not see her as free. I won't be taken again," she said firmly. He looked at her. "I won't let that happen." He listened and adjusted the plan without hesitation. When they left before dawn, she did not feel like someone fleeing. She felt like someone taking control. The journey was harder this time. They moved through rough terrain, sleeping little and staying alert. Once, they spotted riders in the distance and hid among rocks until nightfall. Fear returned, sharp and real, but it did not paralyze her. She acted, thought, and adapted. During one close call, she helped lead the horse through a narrow pass that confused their pursuers. When they finally reached safety, the cowboy looked at her with open respect. "You saved us," he said simply. She nodded. She did not need praise, knowing her own strength was enough. They reached a hidden valley after days of travel. Water flowed gently and trees offered shelter. It was a place rarely used, known only through stories passed down quietly. Here, they rested. As they sat by the water, she spoke about her past more openly than ever before. She told him about her family, her childhood, the lessons taught by elders. She spoke of loss without breaking. Her voice carried sorrow but also pride. He listened as he always did, without interrupting. When she finished, he spoke too. He admitted his guilt about the auction, even if his intentions had been different. He confessed that he had feared he was not strong enough to do what was right. He had doubted himself every step of the way. "You did what you could," she said. "And you kept choosing better. I won't stay hidden forever. I want to find my own place, my own life." That night she looked at the stars and felt something close to peace. She had faced danger, made choices, and reclaimed her voice. The world was still uncertain, but she was no longer lost within it. Whatever came next, she would meet it standing tall. And that knowledge made her stronger than any chain ever could. The morning in the hidden valley felt different from all the mornings before. The air was calm and the light touched the land gently, as if giving permission for change. The woman woke early, not because of fear, but because her mind was full of plans. She sat near the water and watched the surface move slowly. Every small wave reminded her that nothing stays still forever. The cowboy joined her after some time. He carried 2 cups of warm drink and handed one to her. They sat without speaking for a while. Silence between them no longer felt heavy. It felt honest. They both knew that this quiet place was only temporary. Safety found by hiding could not last forever. The world beyond the valley was still difficult, but it was also where choices could truly be made. "I'll help you prepare," he said finally. "Whatever you decide." "I know." Places where survival depended on cooperation. She spoke of these places, and together they discussed what was possible. He offered supplies without hesitation: food, tools, warm clothing, and a strong horse. He did not act as if he were giving charity. He treated it as preparation, the same way he prepared himself for any long journey. One evening, as they sorted supplies, she paused and looked at him closely. "Why are you helping me like this?" she asked. He took a moment before answering. "Because if I don't, then everything that happened before means nothing. This is how I make it right." As the day of departure came closer, emotions grew quieter but deeper. There were no dramatic words, no promises made that could not be kept, only understanding. On the final morning, the sky was clear. She packed the last of her belongings and stood beside the horse. For a moment, she felt the old fear return. Leaving safety, even imperfect safety, always carried risk. But she reminded herself that she was not running anymore. She was choosing. He stood across from her, hands resting at his sides. "You won't be alone out there," he said. "You know how to survive." It was simple, worn smooth with use. "For protection," he said, "and for memory." Some days were long and tiring. Some nights were lonely, but she did not lose her way. She trusted her instincts and adjusted when needed. When she reached settlements, she spoke carefully, choosing who to trust and when to move on. Eventually, she found a small community near water and fertile land. The people there were cautious but fair. They asked questions, but they listened. She offered her skills, her knowledge of the land, and her willingness to work. Slowly, she earned her place. She built a simple home with her own hands. She worked beside others, shared meals, and told stories when asked. She did not hide her past, but she did not let it define her. Her strength came not from what she had lost, but from what she had endured and reclaimed. Seasons changed. Time passed. Sometimes she thought of the cowboy. She hoped he had found peace or at least rest from the weight he carried. She did not regret leaving. She knew it had been the right choice for both of them. One evening, as she watched the sun set over her new home, she realized something important. Freedom had not come in a single moment. It had come in many small decisions. Speaking when it mattered, leaving when it was time, trusting herself above all else. She stood taller now, not because the world had become kinder, but because she had learned how to stand within it. Her story was not one of rescue. It was one of survival, choice, and dignity reclaimed. And that was enough.